I've always been able to just count on some wonderful people to come down and give their knowledge of the ragtime world and Stride and beyond. We had Sonny Leland did the Boogie Woogie. Last year I had Neville Dickey talking about aspects of ragtime in England and his history, and always find something. So this year I wanted to find something completely different that's uncharted and off the leash. I think it's more like it. I have heard over the years so many great stories from Jeff. He's still accumulating them, and there's still some yet to come. But they'll keep you entertained because he is one of the few full-time working musicians who, he does ragtime. He and Ann do a lot of things. They go around the world, and they do cruises and specialties. And they've run into some issues and some other funny things and weird customers and so on. So I'm going to let Jeff tell you about this. Ladies and gentlemen, the remarkable and unrepeatable Jeff Barker.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Gold stars to all of you for attending this talk so early. I have to be here, but you made a choice. And I'm surmising that you are all here for one of three reasons. One, you want to crack at going full-time, perhaps either retiring from or replacing your current vocation to feed your music habit. Or perhaps in Oliver Moore's case, you're contemplating living the dream of life on the road as a musician. You want to hear sordid tales of the trials of being on the road 85% of every year. Or more prosaically, the weather outside is not to your liking. But I was just out there, and it's gorgeous, so you really have made a sacrifice. In any event, our esteemed seminar director, Bill Edwards, has decided you've had enough knowledge and erudition this weekend.
I am steamed.
You are steamed. So am I. I'm getting kind of steamed myself. And so observation and experience are what this next 50 or so minutes are about. We'll hear colorful stories, adventures that I, myself, and also Ann and I have undergone and enjoyed. And then at the end, I'll try and make sure there's enough time for a little bit of Q&A. That would be great. All right, so to begin. Now, a full-time musician. Okay, if you're living in New York, LA, Nashville, perhaps even Chicago, as Paul Sorrow does, you can be a full-time musician and never leave anywhere. Just stay where you are. As long as you enjoy perhaps being a studio musician during the day, and then gigging in bars and hotels and things at night. And a lot of musicians in those meccas of New Orleans, same thing. Those guys, they like to get out in July and August because it's so hot. But they're very happy to be there because there's so much going on. Well, you make the choice like my wife and I did to stay in a very small town in Connecticut called Mystic. And unless you're a specialist in sea shanties, you've got to go somewhere else to do the work. That's what we've done. So, just a little laundry list before we begin. Bill asked me to just sort of describe to you what it is to be a full-time traveling musician. Being a full-time musician means being well-known in remote locations far from home, but basically anonymous in your own hometown. Being a full-time musician means having many close friends around the world with whom you spend precious little time, but with whom you share an intense, supportive relationship. While again, not knowing people from or near home all that well, and certainly no one you would call a close friend. Being a full-time musician means the notion of a vacation, what the Europeans would call a holiday, is staying at home for a few quiet days, without letting anyone know you are there. Without giving in to responding to the constant rings, pings, whistles, and splats you yourself have set up on your innumerable electronic devices. Being a full-time traveling musician means trying to expand your repertoire during your 18 hours at home in between engagements, even as you are prepping for that huge concert at the end of the week where you need to include the A-list, though well-worn material that got you hired in the first place. Being a full-time musician means trying to keep track of the details regarding the unique requirements each booking presents. For example, car rentals, hotel rooms, outfits for both on stage and off, requests from the promoter of pieces to play or not to play. And when on tour, calculating the time it will take to navigate the distance from one gig to the next, from one hotel to the next gig, and then on to a new hotel for your 10 days of one-nighters beginning next week, while simultaneously responding to requests to book the act with all the details just mentioned previously in the mix for an engagement in November 2022. Being a full-time musician means lamenting that the phone never stops ringing and the emails never cease, while at the same time fearing, nay, knowing that one day they will. Being a full-time musician means no 401k, no paid vacations, no weekends, no sick days, no bankable hours, and the need to live in the moment while looking years into the future and every second in between. I think about how rewarding it is to be a musician on one level, but then once in a while you just sort of crave that 9-to-5 job where you close the office door behind you, you don't think about it till the next day. And every person who works those kinds of jobs gets over 100 days off a year in the form of weekends. A year. My wife and I have been married nearly 20 years, and we have yet to have 100 days off in that span of time. Now, we're working though. That's the great thing. That was a digression. Coming back to being a full-time musician, it means prepping for that recording while making sure all of the other musicians are lined up, know their parts, getting that artwork for that recording done, and the liner notes, paying the royalties on your selections, wrestling with the notion that continuing to produce physical CDs when even grandmothers and everyone younger seem more interested in streaming the music online rather than cluttering up their homes with more stuff. Now, so far, the picture I paint of the full-time musician is admittedly pretty bleak. The following quote, which someone anonymous appropriated from the gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson when he was talking about TV media, is this. It cynically sums up the whole affair. The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side. No matter who actually appropriated that statement, it represents the worst possible scenario in describing life in the business, or as we're exploring here, life as a full-time traveling musician. So why do it? Why put yourself through the constant uprooting, the dozens of hours of sometimes daily travel crammed into a seat on a car, train, or plane designed for a 2-foot malnourished 6-year-old? The limited, if any, decent food choices, the unrelenting barrage of disjointed noise assaulting you from public place to public place, the sense of complete and utter disassociation with your current surroundings, the need to unpack from one 7-week tour on the same night you are looking for those socks you need for the 5-week tour you're about to leave for 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, the unending leaps from time zone to time zone, and the persistent fear that all of it will suddenly come to an end. Because you love it. You love the adventure, the beautiful, never the same thing onceness of it all. You love the opportunity to share music that grabbed you when you were a kid and forever made you its slave. To hear an audience react with such pleasure to your performance, to see so many smiles, to know that your dedication, your endurance, your discipline, yes, perhaps even your God-given talent, has touched someone's heart and made their step a little lighter. You love the places you get to visit and the people you get to meet that would never have come into your life had you chosen a different path. You're able to keep loving it by choosing positivity over negativity, by choosing gratitude over anger or frustration, by choosing acceptance over stress, at least on your best days. And in self-defense, having a few rules to keep your travel aim true, which I share with you now. If you'd like to take notes, please feel free, but I'm sure someone's reporting this and you don't have to. Rule number 1, always check hotel room and car prices from week to week leading up to your travel, as they often decrease as the date gets closer. And I have saved thousands of dollars over the last 20 years doing just that. Matter of fact, the car that we got to come here, she saved $150 the day we were arriving. Because that's how it is. So do that. It's a great way. You stick it to the man, keep more of your money in your pocket. Rule number 2, book your flights as early as possible and stick to one airline or its affiliates whenever you can, for all the reasons. Something goes wrong, you're not number 287 being helped. You're one of the top 20 or 30 people being helped, and you can get to the gig on time. Rule number 3, always treat the time zone you are traveling in as the proper time. Don't give in to your inner clock. Upon arrival at your destination, Don't eat or sleep when your body tells you to. Only do so at the appropriate time in your current location. Jet lag will be dramatically diminished, if not erased, if you stick to this concept. Rule number 4, don't judge a hotel by its lobby. Check out the room first. And if it looks like what we call a don't take your shoes off room, either request a change of room from the front desk, or change of hotel from your promoter, or leave your shoes on. All of the rules I just shared with you are designed to make traveling as easy and pleasant as possible. This final rule that I'm about to share with you, however, is by far the most important one. Adhering to it will avert tragedy. Rule number 5, never, ever get out of bed in the middle of the night until you remember where the bathroom is. Closets, hot tubs, balconies, these are not valid substitutes for the real thing. So, that's the preamble. Tales from the road. My first gig, I was 12 years old. And I was lucky enough that I had an allowance, but I was also getting paid. This is my first paid gig. I was going to get $30 and a couple of cupcakes at my mom's office partner's 60th birthday party, something like that. And there was no piano there, so they went to the trouble of hiring a piano for me to play in upright, like you see in a gazebo or Stark. And I was kind of a smart aleck kid. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. So I'm in the middle of the show, and it really wasn't a show. I was just doing background music from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. Well, they'd only hire the piano until 2:30. So all of a sudden, these gigantic guys are standing on either side of the piano, and I'm looking at them, and I'm playing. And while I'm playing, because that's one of the things I now realize it's a gift to be a divergent thinker for any of you educators, not a convergent thinker. I'm pretty good at that. So I was able to talk with them while I was playing. And I'm saying, hi, what are you here for? Well, we're taking the piano away. I said, I'm not supposed to finish till 3. I'm 12 years old. Well, they only rented it till 2:30. So thinking quickly, I said, okay, well, if we're gonna have to do this, let's do it with a bang. I finished up my song, and I took $10 of my allowance money out of my pocket, and I said, here's $10, I want you to move this piano while I'm playing it, and we'll just leave the room. And they went for it. They were big enough, I mean, you know, they had arms as big as my legs, my torso. So they just lifted the thing up and started walking with it, and I just kept playing. And everybody stopped eating and talking, and they just watched this little kid going along with the piano, out the door. They followed. The guys went up a ramp with me still playing, into a truck with me still playing, closed the back of it with me still playing, and drove around the corner. My mother is still alive. We all had a good laugh about it, and that was my first gig. All right, so let's segue. I'm 15 years old now. By now I'm 15. I've been working in a restaurant called the Yankee Silversmith Inn in Wallingford, Connecticut, which, much like the Katy Depot, had started with a train car that they then just kept expanding. So I was off the side of the train car in the main room, the main bar. It was one of those great old grand pianos, but it had leather along the edges, and then bar stools. And it was literally an old sing-along bar. I knew no tuners, but I had a banjo player who I was playing with. The reason I got the gig is his partner had sadly contracted lung cancer. One of the things back when there was a lot of smoking in all the public places that was happening for many of the musicians working night in and night out. So Bob, who I met in the Ground Round, back in the East Coast we had something called the Ground Round. And there was a piano player, there were silent films, there was peanuts on the floor, and my mom used to take me there when I was 10 and 11 to watch the piano player play. The lights would light up, and the Charlie Chaplin would be on the screen. And it's her fault, really, that I'm doing this instead of, you know, being a shyster lawyer someplace. And that was fun. So Bob got me the gig. He said, you know, Jan, that was her name, it's a kid, he'll happily give back the gig when you come back. And I did. Except that by then, they wanted music 7 nights a week, so I was doing 4 nights and she was doing 3. It was perfect. It was a great way to be educated. He was about 20 years older than I am. He's still alive in his late 70s, living in Florida, sorry. And he taught me all these tunes. One of my gifts was to have a very good ear, and I was able to pick them up as we went. I didn't have to worry about anything. He did all the singing, all that. Well, eventually the guy who was running the place, and the only reason I could be there, they shut it down once because I was only 14 working in a bar. And, you know, the owner said, okay, you're done. Well, a week later, people were complaining and protesting and all that stuff. So he went to his lawyer and he said, how can I get this kid back in here legally? It turned out that his mother had been a waitress at the place and still was for the last 35 years. Her name was Gail. And she agreed to become my guardian while I was on the premises. She signed the paper and that was it, so I could be there. The end of the close downs, which was good. But he eventually started giving me happy hours alone because it became quite a thing. Here's this kid who can play Bye Bye Blackbird and The Entertainer and all this stuff. And I was working out pretty well. I was learning Broadway tunes. I'd have people come in and give me a list of requests, and I'd go home and try and learn them somehow. So that became part of the game, too. This one guy, so I'm sitting here, this one guy's over here, he's here every single week. He was this big guy, he would sit there, and over the next 2 years, we developed a good friendship. He had a proprietary feeling about me, like this is my piano player. And everybody, you know, there were some semi-regulars, but he was always there every happy hour I played. One night, this guy comes in with a suit that was so shiny, it almost blinded you. And he comes in, he's looking around, his nose is broken, he's got slicked back hair. He sits down on this side, facing me and facing the guy who's always there. So about 5 minutes into it, kid, I want you to play As Time Goes By. I knew that tune, that's good. Because there's a big tip jar right in the middle of it, yeah. Big tip, like a bowl that would hold vast bouquets of flowers. And of course, I would feed it myself when I got there with a buck, just to see what happened. So a buck went in, great, this is terrific. Remember, I'm only 14, no, I'm 15 by now. $9 a lot. So, great. About 20 minutes later, hey kid, he's had a couple of drinks now. That sounded so great, that's my favorite tune. Play it again. Okay, so I played again. A $5 bill goes in. This went on for about an hour, and I ended up playing it 5 or 6 times, where my friend was deciding that too much attention was being paid to Shiny Suit. And he said, you know, I like that song, but there's so many other great songs. We've heard it 5 times now. Here's $10 so you don't play it anymore. I had my ideas in place. Okay, so I started doing some of his favorites. And by then, of course, I knew the dozen or so songs he'd love to hear every week. And again, about a half hour later, you know, that song is great. Here's 20 for you to play it again. All right? This went on for about another hour. 20s were going in. He finally put in a 50 for me to play it again. And that's when this guy just stood up and said, look, there's more people than just you here, buddy. And there were. It was a full place. You don't own this place. You don't own this guy. We're done with that. And the fellow said, I want, he took out another $50 bill. I mean, I made $300 in this one exchange. It was pretty good. Bought half of my new car with that. Well, it was 20 years old, but it was new to me. He reaches over, and now he makes sure that his jacket comes open. And as he puts the money in, you see the piece he's carrying. And he says, Jeff will play as time goes by. This is me. What key would you like it in? What language? You know, like, this is like, I'm going to die here. So we finished the tune, and then finally, even for a 15-year-old, common sense will sometimes reign. I finished it with a flourish. I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a break. I'll be back in a few minutes. And I got out of there. I was going to go find the manager, the owner, to say, this is out of hand, do something about it. But I didn't have to, because the fellow chases after me, and he wraps his hand around me. Well, kid, you're something, I'll tell you. Here's my card. Guido, something else Italian, completely unpronounceable. I'm in the city, but I could be here in 2 hours. If you ever need me, you give a call. I still have that card. So then you segue to college, and by now I'm doing a lot of sing-along. I love it. I'm playing a lot of ragtime, banjo players, tuba players. They're all around me teaching me stuff. The best thing for young musicians to do in any genre of music, but especially in this early American music, is find the people older than you are who know more than you do, and then learn from them. And that's actually the tenet that I'm carrying for the rest of my life. Until, if I'm lucky enough, there is nobody left older than me. But there's still people I learn from all the time, both younger and older. And it's so great. Here it's like a classroom for 4 days, you know, for the musicians anyway. So I'm 19 and I end up, same lady, unfortunately, I shadowed her through her tragic life. Jan, with the lung cancer, contracted it again. And this time, when she left, she never came back. But I took over for her in a Sunday afternoon gig where the leader was a 92-year-old banjo player. I was 19. The New York Times actually did an article on this because it was, you know, just amazing that we were all playing the same tunes and loving them as much. He was the worst banjo player I'd ever met. But it didn't matter because he would sit there next to the piano and he'd start to strum the first tune. And it'd be about this tempo. And as he kept strumming, he'd start leaning towards the left until he was actually leaning on the upright piano next to him. And after the tune was over, I gently propped him back up. And he talked to the audience. He was charming, terrible musician. I would concentrate on listening to the bass player and the other banjo player. But about 4 tunes in, he'd see some young lady in the audience. And there was a dance floor off to the right of the gig. And he'd put his banjo down and go over and ask her to dance. And for the next 3.5 hours, she would be on the dance floor with different women in the audience. And I have to tell you, I am not making this up. At the age of 92, he often took one of them home with him. One more early story before we get into a lot of the travel stuff. And this one's epic. Where I live in Connecticut, we're right on Long Island Sound. Now think the Hamptons. Think the Vandersnoots. I mean, these are really wealthy people. And there was a 1906 oyster boat owned by a guy who was a banjo player. He was quite a character. He was what you would have gotten had you taken W.C. Fields and crossed him with Winston Churchill. You would have come up with Stu Ingersoll. This big guy, graduated Yale in the 50s, knew all the people and everything. And his sidekick was a banjo player called Artie Doran, with whom I played for about 25 years. And we were hired to go out to the Long Island Yacht Club, go out in the middle of the Sound, and have all of these little beautiful boutique yachts and boats come around and like a flotilla hook up to the oyster boat and have pretty much a floating 4-hour frat party out in the middle of Long Island Sound. So we took this 1906 oyster boat. We had to leave at 4 a.m. for a gig that was starting at 7 p.m. because it only went 8 knots an hour at its fastest. Chuck, 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 chuck. It was great. You know, I got to know the seagulls. I even named a few. We're getting there. So we show up. Here we are. And we got there early. We were there about an hour early. It was catered event, real top notch. Now, he had a red upright piano bolted on the deck of this 1906 oyster boat. And that was where I would be sitting and playing. We had done many gigs. In Mystic, Connecticut, where my wife and I live, we have an antique boat parade every year at the end of July. And for the previous 15 years before this epic gig, I would sit there going up and down the Mystic River with 27 banjos, 4 tubas, a couple trombones, playing George M. Cohan, patriotic stuff, all in bunting. It was great. So much fun. This piano, painted fire engine red, was never covered. After the season was over, the next season starts 9 months later. I would have to show up early, open it up, get all the nests out, clean everything out, leaves, you know, because he never, ever, ever covered it. He had made it with a soundboard from an old upright. He had the soundboard, the strings, and the hammers. He had built the rest of it around with plywood and painted it red. It was literally a homemade piano. Never once did he tune it. And it was always in perfect tune. How could that happen? The strings had rusted, they still played and sounded great. And it wasn't just the beer talking, ladies and gentlemen, I know this. Okay, we're back in Long Island Sound. Here come all of these, there's the Muffies and the Vander Hooses and the Hootawatsits, and they all inevitably have white trousers, blue double-breasted jacket, and a captain's hat. Every single one of them had a captain's hat. This was the real thing. They come on board. Oh yes, I love this. How quaint it is here. Can you believe this? I didn't even know things floated back then. Wow. We endured it. It was a good paying gig. Play along, have ourselves a good time. The liquor is flowing like water. Everybody's having a great time. The food was terrific. We're laughing. Well, the 4-hour gig became a 6-hour gig. And eventually Artie, the other banjo player, hey Stu, are we getting overtime? Gee, I don't think so. Rich people are pretty tight. I don't know if we're getting anything out of them. That's how they stay rich. Well, okay, so, and I'm just a kid. By now I'm 22. I said, so what are we going to do? And we kept playing. And by now the sun was beginning to set. And you don't want to be trying to get back to Connecticut in the pitch dark on a 1906 oyster boat that only goes 8 knots an hour. So finally Artie said, oh, you know what? When was the last time you fired up the engine? I said, well, to get here, and then I turned it off, we were floating. He said, yeah, okay, now, when was the last time it did what it sometimes does? And Stu did the calculations and said, oh, about 4 times ago. Like clockwork, every 5 times, something very special would happen when you started this engine, which was down in the hold. And it had the pistons, it had all that stuff. You started it with a match. It was a fuse. So Art said, Stu, these are intrepid yachtsmen. Perhaps they'd like to see how you start this thing. You're right. That sounds like a fine idea. So he puts down his tuba. He was playing tuba, or he was not banjo, not piano. And he said, gentlemen, isn't this an amazing craft? Yeah, it is. Would you like to see how it starts? Yeah, that'd be great. So they go down this steep ladder, down into the hold. And Artie and I stayed up top. And we could hear him. I'm saying, yes, we keep it well oiled, and when it's going, the pistons go up and down. It makes a lot of noise, but it's really fun. And, would you like me to start it for you? Oh, yeah, sure. So we're up top. Now, we can't hear anything else because you can hear the voices muffled and quietly right underneath us. But Artie, who had been on this thing for many, many times, as I did, started counting. 10, 9. He got down to 1, and sure as you can imagine, huge black clouds of smoke come out of the hole. All the captains of the flotilla come out of the hole, completely blackened. They get on their boats and they're gone. 3 minutes later, you couldn't see anybody. It was like we were all alone in this vast body of water. It was unbelievable. So we started the journey home. Now, they had had a lot more to drink than I had. So they put me in charge of steering this thing. Here's the compass, Jeff. See that 270? Just stay on that. That'll get us home. Okay. Good, okay. The Seagull returned. I had a chat. There's something ahead. I said, hey, Art. Stu by now was snoozing. Art, what do you think that is up there? I don't know, Jeff. It looks like a road. It was a sandbar. We had now gone up 2/3 of the way onto a sandbar, which hadn't been there when we come through during high tide, but now was during low tide. And there we sat. Stu woke up. We're gonna do something about this. If we move around on the deck, maybe it'll loosen. The 3 of us are running around this gigantic oyster boat, which about as far as, from one end of the stage, about halfway to the other. Of course it's not going to happen. So I decided, well, I'm going to go walking. I get off the thing and start walking on the sandbar, and I found a God-to-honest sign saying, be careful, you might drown. And I'm looking at it, it's ankle deep, and I'm thinking, I'm not that drunk. If I fall over, maybe I'll drown. I get back on, and well, we're gonna have to wait it out. I've called the Coast Guard, but they won't be able to get to us until about 4 this morning. Okay. So he goes in, he takes the only bunk, and Art and I are left sleeping outside. It got a little chilly, but it was summertime. It was all right, nice breeze. We woke up at about 3 in the morning, and the boat had shifted. It was on its side, so now my head was down here and my feet were up there. This is really cold. Coast Guard came, they tried to drag us off and burned out an engine. Had to call a second boat to come and take us off. We got off. Now one of our engines is out and we're going to go 4 knots an hour back home. This gig, which was supposed to be a pleasant time, took 2.5 days to accomplish. And the last thing I remember is Art sitting in the corner with a stubby pencil and a little pad. And I said, "What in the world are you doing, Doran?" And he said, "I'm calculating how much money I'm making on this gig. 17 cents an hour." But these are the kinds of things you want to keep doing, you know? Now, real quickly, I just want to mention the laundry list of people who have influenced me, who I love. Some folks that I knew before I came to Sedalia for the first time. Met Marty Eggers with the Black Swan Jazz Band at our festival in Connecticut in 1990. Met Frederick Hodges the year before at that same festival when he was playing, and he still does, with the Royal Society Jazz Orchestra. Met Scott Kirby, who you're going to see in the film coming up after my talk, in 1992 in New Orleans. Met Tom McDermott that same year, and David Thomas Roberts that same year, all in New Orleans. It was an amazing thing. Met Terry Waldo, who's been here many times, in 1990, again in Connecticut. Had the honor of hiring him to do some of the gigs I wasn't able to do when I could string 2 or 3 together. He'd come up from New York. Met Sue Keller in 1994 in Connecticut. Then I get to Sedalia for the first time and I realize there are other people who like this music besides me. It's easy for kids today. They find each other through social media. There wasn't any of that back in the early 1990s. So I met Dick Zimmerman for the first time. That was an experience. What an amazing guy he is. Ian Whitcomb, a wonderful singer and ukulele player. Bob Milne, with whom I still share a deep friendship. And the queen of ragtime, Mimi Blay, who still amazes. And one guy who means a lot to any of us who have been around for the last 20 years doing this and enjoying it, Bob Darch. He was an amazing character. If you don't know anything about him, go online and learn as much as you can. Just talk to Bill. I'm sure there's a segment on your website about him. It will be good. This is what happens when you meet a guy who's an old hoofer and vaudevillian, who notices a kindred spirit in you. He started teaching me routines. And wherever we were appearing together, whether it was Connecticut or Georgia or here or anywhere, we do these routines, you know, before doing tours. And it was amazing to have that experience with him. So a couple of years after we hadn't seen each other, but we were coming up to Sedalia, sometime around February, I received a box at home, about this size. I opened it up, and there were about 8 left shoes in it. And they were all in varying degrees of decay, along with a letterhead from the Acme Shoe Company, saying, "Dear Mr. Barnhart, here's the first half of your order. You must complete your payment before you receive the other shoes." Typed. And Anne's looking at me saying, "What in the world is this?" You know, it was before we were so worked up, and rightly so, about terrorism, so we weren't looking for bombs or anything. It was like, they're shoes. So I just put it out of my mind and kept going. We were busy at that time. 2 weeks later, another box. Another set of left shoes. This went on a bi-weekly, every 2 weeks or so, another box. They kept getting bigger, and the shoes got more and more disgusting with the Acme form letter. Until finally, there was a slip-up. Up until the final shipment, the perpetrator had always had someone else handwrite my address and name on the top of the box. This time, perhaps, he was just in a rush. It was Bob Darch himself who lettered it. And he had a very distinctive lettering. Anybody who's ever seen it knows. So I knew. I got it. So we show up here. We're in Sedalia. This is back in the halcyon days, late 90s. Darch is in one corner with Larry Melton. He's back at the Best Western having dinner down there in the dinner area. Max Morath. I mean, the list goes on. Dick Zimmerman. They're all there. All the big, amazing names that we all look up to. And they're over there doing what legends do. I'm sitting with Brian. and a few others. Jan Hamilton Douglas, do you remember Jan Douglas from St. Louis? Such a great friend. I'm so sorry he's gone. We're sitting there, and I'm seeing Darch, and he's telling one of his stories, and Marath is looking wildly on at him. And I said, hey, Brian, give me your shoe. I need your right shoe. Why is that, buddy? He was so innocent back then. I said, I just need to borrow it. I'll get it back, I promise. Okay. I wanted his shoe because his feet are bigger than mine. And I wanted to have an impact. Paid the waiter $10 to take it into the kitchen, dress it up, just with dry things, lettuce, put it on a bed of lettuce, do something nice with it. It wouldn't harm the shoe. Put it in a covered tin, and bring it over to Mr. Darch. In front of all of these people. Which he did. So we're on one end of the dining room, sitting over there looking, watching. Here it comes. Goes right in front of Bob. What's this? Oh, from an admirer at the other end of the thing. Oh, he's looking around. He opens up. And I am just falling over laughing. And Brian is laughing too, but he goes, well, now what? I said, what do you mean? How do I get my shoe back? I'll just go over there. You don't mess with lifelong, full-time musician, hoofer, vaudevillian comedians like Bob Darch was. We never got the shoe until he decided, since it had been sent over as something to eat, it should be dressed. And the ketchup, and the mustard, and the salt, and the pepper, and everything went into that shoe. And I bought Brian Holland a new pair of shoes. But it was worth it. Bill, can we maybe do this again some year? Because I'm going to run, I'm only touching the surface. There's so much other stuff there. All right. Would you be interested in a part 2 next year? Okay. Because I do realize there's a lot here. And I don't want to rush through it, because these are the things that make it okay, that make it fun. Coming here and saying, okay, I'm not going to make it to after hours. I mean, I used to when I was Adam Swanson's age and Oliver Moore's age and Bill Edwards' age, but I just can't do it anymore. Sometimes I can if I don't have a 9 a.m. seminar to give, or a 9:30 set to play or something. And I'm not complaining, I'm just saying that's probably why you don't see us at the after hours. Also the fact that we were in England 96 hours ago, and when we arrived in town, we arrived 5 minutes before our first set. So, I don't even know what day it is, I just know I'm here in this beautiful revamped theater. Isn't this gorgeous? He does such a great job. Carl, thanks for all the great work all weekend long. That's all I know. This is where I need to be right now. So it's fun, but that's one of the reasons why, as you get older, you have to pace yourselves. Because it's not going home, putting your feet up, it's going home and getting the next gig ready. So just a couple of things from foreign lands, and we can revisit this next time too. There was a gig I did in Switzerland. Now we have a friend, Martin Jaeger, he's appeared here many times. And while he was teaching at his academy in Zurich, we went and did quite a few shows, Anne and myself. He was always great, always had some nice shows for us. We had a few backers who would give us other shows to do, some silent films as well. It was really fun. Then we started branching out, as one must. We didn't want to just count on him anymore to get us some work. And we ended up with a gig in a nice theater, and I'm not going to give any more details as to what town or what theater, because this is what happened to us. We get there, and it's on a proper stage, a beautiful, when I went up to look at it, with the key cover down, a nice 9-foot Steinway. This is good. You open it up, there's electric piano inside. They had taken the guts out, because the new director, a young person, said, well, we have to tune this all the time. That just seems silly. Let's get rid of everything in there, sell it off to some piano manufacturer in town, and just stick one of these in. We'll never have to tune it, plug it in and go. I was a little bit upset, as you might surmise. And I said, hey, the contract says a really good piano. Now, it wasn't as, if any of you have seen Green Book, it wasn't like that scene where he decks the guy. Because there's, a junky piano with trash in it. It was a beautiful theater. I said, I don't think I want to play. Well, people are coming to see you. They talked me into it. And so this is what happened. I don't know if this is going on or not. If not, that's okay. Hello, thank you. So it was one of these Technique keyboards. This is about 15 years ago. And the only problem is that the transpose button was very close to and I'm playing really fast, and sometimes you'd hit the transpose button you didn't mean to. For those of you who are not musicians, it means you're changing key instantaneously. So while you're playing this on the keys, what's being heard is this. Just give you a quick example of what that meant. This went on for 2 hours. And at the end of it, I think people were asking for their money back. Why'd you bring this guy in? He can't play anything. To make matters worse, and I think it sort of gave it away for the audience, there were also all these sound effects on the right-hand side. So all of a sudden I'm playing Maple Leaf Rag, and now it's a spaceship. I never went back there, but last I heard they actually got the piano back and they have a new artistic director. That's pretty good. As promised, I want to finish about 5 minutes early so we can get ready for something which will be much more edifying and equally entertaining with Tom McDermott's film. So let's see if we can open it up for questions, comments, thoughts, reminiscences. Karen.
One thing when you were talking in your preamble that makes it work for you is that your wife is also in the same career.
That's a great observation. Karen just said one of the things that makes it work for you is that your wife is also in the same career and can travel with me. And it certainly does. It would have to be one of two scenarios, and we have that one, which makes me very happy. The first scenario we don't have is that the musician is married to a very patient spouse who doesn't do anything except make gobs of money at some sort of a corporate job. There are some at this festival who enjoy that. And that's one way to have it happen. The thing I couldn't handle is that would make me being away from my loved one for 40 weeks of the year, 85% of the year. So one of the things that was great was finding my soulmate and having her be a gifted musician who was willing to step off the perch of Bach and Mozart and Fauré and symphonic stuff and come down into the lower shelves of American popular music and love it. So that has worked for us. That means that we're together almost constantly. On occasion, I might get something where I'm away for a week or two. But that really makes it much more meaningful for me. It really does. And I know another couple here this weekend, Stephanie and Paolo. It's the same thing. They haven't been doing it together as a team quite as long as Dan and I have. But you see the two of them, and you know, individually, they are simply brilliant. When they come together and they pool their personal and professional resources to create what they create as a team, they're unstoppable. Nothing can touch them. So that's something very beautiful. And I know that they could have been happy with someone else who wasn't a musician, but I think their happiness is 10 times what it would have been in that case. So yes, it's a very good observation, and I feel very blessed every day of my life. What else? Don't be hesitant.
I haven't heard how you actually got started playing the piano, or how you became interested in being a musician.
All right, real briefly, how I started playing the piano. When I was a kid, my parents listened to what you normally would listen to at their age in that time. We're talking late 60s, early 70s. So the Beach Boys, Dr. Hook, the Beatles, all this stuff was going on. Okay, that's fine. Go visit my grandparents, and they actually had 8-track tapes. I just thought that was kind of cool. I didn't know what that was. They put one on. You don't have to do anything. Just keep moving around. Oh, great. So the one they put on for me was 1940s. Hits of the 40s. And there was all this smooth stuff. I had the craziest dream last night, and all these things. And sweet music. I'm like, oh, this is okay. And then Pee Wee Hunt's version of 12th Street Rag came on. And at the end of it, do waka do, and I was blown away. I was about 6. I said, this is the stuff. Now, my grandfather was a theater organist. Not in a theater, he wasn't good enough for that. What he was, though, was someone who had built pipes for himself and connected them to this 3-key organ, which was in his home, in the music room. in Seabright, New Jersey, very small town, football field wide from the Shrewsbury River to the Atlantic Ocean, so it did flood sometimes, a mile long, no matter where I was in town, down in town at the little drugstore having a malt. I mean, that's the kind of old thing it was, even in the 70s. You could hear that organ. And for a young boy to be able to make that much noise, oh yeah. So I was always fiddling around, not really accomplishing anything. And then I decided, well, it's time to learn something. I started figuring out melodies, learned harmonies by looking on his sheet music. He had the notes written for what chord it was. So by the time I'm 9, I taught myself left-hand harmonies and right-hand melodies on stuff. Picked up stuff like ear on the radio. But it was when I was 7, and this is the story many of us share, when the film The Sting came out. My parents went to see it. They were captivated by the story and also by the music. And in the lobby, you could purchase the LP to bring home. So they did. The next morning, they put it on, and right from those first strings, do-do-do-do-do-do, I'm like, what is that? And that was it. I became, as I said earlier, its slave. So I self-taught till 9, and my mom said, time to take some lessons so you actually learn what you're doing. She got me a teacher who tried to make me learn rudimentary classical music. I eventually got up to the Sonata in C by Mozart and all that stuff, Furley's. I was not so good at it. And whenever he wasn't around, I would always like to try and play it in ragtime. Now I'm following again in the footsteps of Eubie Blake, Fats Waller, all the people who wanted to syncopate everything. Well, finally, about 11, I sat down and I said, Jay, I don't practice the stuff you give me. I sight read it when you're in front of me, and that's not right for you. And I don't like this kind of music to play. I love hearing it, and if someone can play it well, I love it. But it's not going to be me. And so I'm afraid this isn't working out for me. Now, I know that sounds pretty mature for an 11-year-old, but I've really given it a lot of thought. And I talked to my mom about it, and she helped me figure out how to word what I needed to say. So I said it, and he said, Jeff, give me one more week. He came back the following week with a fake book. Now, a fake book is when you have the melody written, treble clef, just the melody, and above it you have chord symbols. And in this particular fake book, which was one of the very original ones, if not the original one, long before the real book, it was songs from the 20s through the 40s, which was the sound I wanted anyway. He said, here you go. Rather than struggling with Furley's for 5 weeks and only having one piece accomplished, now you have 472 tunes at your fingertips. And that was it. He started teaching me styling, and I'm where I am today because of Jay Hickerson, with whom I'm still good friends. He's 84, he lives in Florida. So if it weren't for him, I'd have a corner office someplace, rooking the poor people. But I don't. That's okay, I'm happy with that. So thank you for asking that. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Would you please tell the story?
Okay, I was going to say that for next time, but I won't.
Well, you can tell it.
Bill mentioned cruises, and we could do an entire 3 seminars on stories of cruises. But Ann and I have done a lot of them together, and this is before she was traveling with me on them. So we're going back, again, nearly just about 20 years. I was working on a cruise ship that was presenting jazz, and we were going through the Amazon, and then out into the larger bodies of water and all that stuff. It was on a ship that really should have been dry docked a decade before. All of the decor was, 1960s. It was scary, actually, because it was one of those ones where even the slightest ripple on the water, and the whole ship was going, ooh. There were no stabilizers on this thing at all. And they just had no attention to detail. The greatest cruise director I've ever met in my life, because he knew he was on a death trap tub. And so he was the best cruise director, and we all fell in love with him. He was magnificent. He really should have started his own country. I would have gone. He was great. So we're having a good time, and we ended up hitting rough seas one night. I mean, really rough seas. So much so that they quarantined everybody into their cabins, and all you heard all night were these horrendous crashes, because they had nothing tied down. They had nothing tied down. They were used to doing these inner river city river cruises, and the Amazon River cruise was mostly that, except that you had 2 days where you had to go around to the next tributary area you're going to go in. You were out in the middle of nowhere. Heavy seas. The next morning, You know, it was almost like hearing Greek. The sunlight comes up, glass seas, it was great. We're walking around through a war zone. You get to the performance area, the white Yamaha grand piano they had on the stage was now on the dance floor, flipped over on its top. So my friend Eric and I, he's a beautiful classical pianist. He was on there doing the classical shows. He had 1 or 2 shows during the week, and we were doing nightly jazz shows. And we had started palling around immediately, you know, because we were just having so much fun listening to play all this beautiful classical stuff. And he'd listen to me improvise. And so we were just, it was a nice friendship. He actually performed at my wife and my wedding. Really, really great guy. We went off and we've been just walking around. We couldn't afford the excursion, so we just walked around. We get to this one town, and this is the afternoon of the day after this big storm got through. And we start going up this path. Because here it is, part of this thing. There wasn't much going on. We were going to be there for about 6 hours, going up a path. Yeah, it was great. And there were some other tourists going up this path as well, because the idea was at the top you'd see a beautiful waterfall canopy and panorama, and so worth doing. So it's about a half mile uphill, and then you get to that. About a quarter of a mile up, we're passing all the shacks and the shanties of the people who live on the island, the native people on the island. And we passed this last tank, and in it, let's see, I mean, I can't give you the exact dimensions. All I know is that there was a live baby dolphin in that tank. And it had to have just been born. When they're born, they're about 40 pounds. Baby dolphins, or, dolphins. It was in this tank. And, the bubbling, it's obviously distressed. And what they were doing, and 2 tourists were having it happen right then, you could get your picture taken with the baby dolphin for $1. So we passed this, and all we're talking about on the way up to this thing, I don't even remember what it looked like up top. We were so shaken by this. Like, this is wrong. And, then we're arguing, okay, well, but here they are, they need to make a living. The storm obviously washed it up onto the shore, and as the tide was going, they were able to grab it, and now it's theirs. And they're using it to earn money. But it just seemed wrong. So as we're going back down, I stopped. They, they're saying, hey, $1, that kind of thing. They understood a few words of English, mostly surrounding money. And I said, okay, 20, I showed them. And they're like, oh. And I said, we take the dolphin. They're like, no. 40, we take the dolphin. And I know they can't understand anything except the numbers. But us going, they didn't want to do that. Finally, I said, Eric, what do you got? He put out 20. So for $60, we bought ourselves a dolphin. Which we then, we both got it out of the tank. I mean, it's wet, it's sliming around. He hugged it to his chest. He was a really strong guy. From the piano playing. And I just started running down the path, screaming at the top of my lungs, out of the way, dolphin coming through. So all the tourists, we got it down. We got to the end of it. We actually got it into the water, went up hip deep, got into the water, and it took off. We're like, this is great. As we turned, we looked back and want to see if we could get one last glimpse. This is the best. There was a larger dorsal fin out there. The mother had been waiting. And you saw them come together and then swim away. And that was the... So the moral of that story is beware of Greek ships. And that's what we were on. It was a Greek ship. And if you ever see a dolphin, make sure you have a lot of money with you and buy it. We're going to have to continue this next time. And thank you so much. I'll keep note of what I've already told you, and I'll have new stories by next year. Back to Bill. Thank you for honoring me with your presence. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you for supporting the music and the musicians who make it.